Before we dive into this thrilling story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest uploads. Your support keeps us going. Now, let's get into it. We were on a family vacation, but I wasn't part of the family. That much became clear the moment we sat down for dinner. The waiter led us to a long, beautifully set table at an upscale restaurant in Hilton Head, South Carolina. White linens, flickering candles, soft music playing in the background. It should have been a perfect evening. I was ready to take my seat beside my husband, Mark, when his father, Richard, casually shook his head and pointed at the waiter. "Oh, there must be a mistake," he said. "She needs her own table." For a second, I thought he was joking. I let out a small laugh, expecting the punchline. It didn't come. Instead, Richard looked at the waiter expectantly, as if waiting for him to correct the arrangement. I turned to Mark, waiting for him to step in. To tell his father that I was his wife, not some random outsider. That there was no need for separate seating arrangements. But Mark only sighed and shrugged, barely looking up from his menu. "It's just their way," he muttered, as if that explanation made any sense. "Their way?" I stood there, dumbfounded, while the waiter hesitated, unsure of what to do. Susan, my mother-in-law, didn't even glance at me as she picked up her wine glass. "You'll be more comfortable that way," she said dismissively. Comfortable. Right. I wanted to argue. To demand an explanation. But I saw the way they looked at me, like I was a problem they'd rather not deal with. Like my presence was an inconvenience. So I sat at my own table. Alone. I should have left that night. Walked out of the restaurant, out of the vacation, out of this whole toxic dynamic. But I didn't. I told myself maybe it was just some weird tradition. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just for tonight. But it wasn't. The next morning, I woke up early, eager to join everyone for breakfast. I sent Mark a text. No reply. I figured they must still be getting ready, so I took my time. When I finally made my way down to the hotel restaurant, I searched for them. They weren't there. I checked my phone again. Still nothing. Confused, I wandered the hotel, checking different spots where they might be. 30 minutes passed before I finally found them. They were already seated at a large table, mid-meal. Laughing. Chatting. As if everything was perfectly normal. As if I didn't exist. I stood there, my stomach sinking. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming down?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Richard barely looked up from his plate. "We assumed you'd figure it out." Susan sipped her coffee, unconcerned. "It's just how we do things." I turned to Mark. He was already eating, acting like this was nothing out of the ordinary. Like it wasn't humiliating to be deliberately excluded from his own family's vacation. That was the moment it hit me. I wasn't part of their family. I never had been. And Mark, my own husband, wasn't on my side. The rest of the trip followed the same pattern. Every meal, I sat alone. Every group activity they forgot to tell me. A private boat tour? I found out when I saw the pictures on Instagram. A fancy wine tasting? I only realized when I saw them dressed up, heading out the door, laughing. I asked Mark about it later, still trying to make sense of it. "You could have texted me," I said, my voice tight. He sighed, as if I was the one being unreasonable. "It's just their way." Again with that phrase. Their way. By the fourth day, I stopped trying. I stopped asking where they were going. Stopped waiting for invitations that would never come. If they wanted me to be invisible, fine. But they had no idea what was coming. Because I had my own way too. The trip was supposed to be perfect. When Mark first told me about the family vacation, I had been genuinely excited. A full week at a luxury resort in Hilton Head, South Carolina, a place straight out of a travel magazine. White sandy beaches stretching endlessly under the golden sun, tall palm trees swaying in the ocean breeze, crystal clear water lapping against the shore. The kind of destination that promised relaxation, the kind of trip where families grew closer, bonded over shared experiences, and created memories to last a lifetime. And more than anything, I had hoped that maybe, just maybe, this trip would be the turning point. It wasn't a secret that my relationship with Mark's parents had always been complicated. From the very beginning, there had been an unspoken divide, something I could never quite put my finger on. It was in the way Susan, my mother-in-law, would smile politely but never ask me questions about myself. The way Richard, my father-in-law, would glance at me with mild disinterest, as if I were nothing more than an accessory to his son's life. The way every family event felt like I was attending as an outsider, a tolerated guest rather than a daughter-in-law. But I had convinced myself that things would change. I thought if I just kept trying, if I was patient, if I was accommodating, if I proved myself to them, they would eventually welcome me in. This trip felt like my chance. A week together in a beautiful place, no distractions, no obligations, just family time. I pictured lazy afternoons by the pool, group dinners filled with laughter, late-night beach walks where we'd talk about anything and everything, warm and intimate moments where I would finally feel like I belong. So, when Mark told me his parents had invited us, I had agreed instantly. I even took care of the logistics, booking the resort, securing the car rental, making dinner reservations at the best restaurants in town. I wanted to show them I was thoughtful, that I cared, that I was committed to being part of the family. And yet, the moment we arrived, I felt something was off. Maybe it was the way Richard handled check-in, not even acknowledging my involvement, even though my name was on every reservation. Maybe it was the way Susan barely glanced at me when we met in the hotel lobby, offering a thin-lipped smile before turning her attention to Mark. Maybe it was the way their conversation seemed to flow easily with each other, inside jokes and family stories that I had never been a part of, references that I didn't understand. It was subtle. A slight turn of the body that excluded me from the circle of conversation. A hand on Mark's arm pulling him closer while leaving me to the side. A laugh that didn't include me, a question directed at everyone but me, a glance that skimmed over me as though I wasn't even standing there. I told myself I was imagining it. That I was being too sensitive. That maybe they were just tired from the flight, or maybe I was overanalyzing things. But then the small things kept adding up. When we went up to our rooms, Mark and I had a beautiful ocean view suite, the one I had booked for us. But when we entered, I noticed something strange. The adjoining suite next door, which I had reserved for his parents, had an open connecting door. I could hear them unpacking, chatting with Mark as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I tried to shake it off. It wasn't a big deal. But it made me feel like I was intruding on something private, as if I had somehow stumbled into a space where I wasn't fully welcome. Then came the first real sign. At dinner that night, we all walked into the restaurant together. The place was stunning, dimly lit with candlelight, soft music playing in the background, and tables set with polished silverware and folded napkins. It felt like the kind of restaurant where families celebrated milestones, where laughter and conversation filled the air. I followed Mark as the waiter led us to a long table, beautifully set for our group. My stomach fluttered with nervous anticipation. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. A chance to sit down, talk, connect, and maybe, just maybe, bridge the gap that had always been there. I pulled out a chair next to Mark, ready to take my seat. Then Richard spoke. "Oh, there must be a mistake," he said, his voice smooth, casual, as if he wasn't about to completely shatter my illusion. "She needs her own table." For a second, I thought I had misheard. The waiter hesitated, looking between us, uncertain. I blinked, my fingers still gripping the back of the chair. "Excuse me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Susan didn't even look up from her menu. "It's just how we do things," she said dismissively, as if that were a reasonable explanation. I turned to Mark, waiting for him to say something, to step in, to tell them this was absurd, that I was his wife, not some stranger. That of course I would be sitting with him. Instead, he sighed, shrugged, and muttered, "It's just their way." Their way. I let go of the chair slowly, feeling my heart hammer in my chest. The waiter still stood there, waiting for direction. Richard gave him a nod, motioning toward a smaller table a few feet away. A table for one. My skin burned with humiliation. 1,000 thoughts ran through my head in an instant. I could refuse. I could make a scene. I could demand an explanation. But as I looked around, I realized something. No one was looking at me. No one cared. To them, this wasn't unusual. It wasn't awkward. It was simply the way things were. And that hurt more than anything. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, a misunderstanding, something that wouldn't happen again. But it wasn't. It was just the beginning. That first dinner should have been the moment I walked away. I should have excused myself, packed my bags, and left. I should have realized right then and there that this was never going to change, that no amount of patience or effort on my part would ever make a difference. But I didn't. Instead, I convinced myself that it was just a weird tradition, an odd family quirk, something I could brush off. Maybe it was a test, or maybe they were simply uncomfortable with change. If I just stayed calm, if I just showed them I wasn't a threat, surely they'd warm up to me. That was my first mistake. The next morning, I woke up early, eager to join everyone for breakfast. I turned to Mark, who was still half asleep beside me, and nudged him lightly. "Hey," I whispered. "What time are we meeting your parents?" He groaned, rubbing his eyes. "Not sure. Just head down whenever." I frowned. "Aren't we going together?" He shrugged. "They'll be there. Just meet us." It felt off. But I pushed the feeling aside, reminding myself that not everything had to be a grand gesture. Maybe they were just relaxed about plans. Maybe they assumed I'd find my way. So I got ready, took my time, and headed down to the hotel restaurant. The place was bustling with morning chatter, the smell of fresh coffee and warm pastries filling the air. I scanned the room, expecting to see them waiting for me. They weren't there. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. Maybe they were running late. I found a quiet corner and waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 15. Something was wrong. Finally, I decided to look around. I wandered past the lobby, through the outdoor terrace, and into the resort's courtyard. And that's when I saw them. Richard, Susan, and Mark. Already seated at a large table, mid-meal, plates half empty, laughter bubbling in the air. They had started without me. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. For a second, I considered turning around, pretending I hadn't seen them. But my feet moved on their own, carrying me toward the table. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming down?" Richard barely looked up from his plate. "We assumed you'd figure it out." Susan sipped her coffee, her expression unreadable. "It's just how we do things. Just how they do things." Again. I turned to Mark, waiting for him to say something. Anything. But he only gave me a tired look, as if I was the one being difficult. By the time I sat down, their conversation had already moved on. I wasn't included. I was an observer, not a participant. That morning I barely ate. The rest of the day followed the same pattern. A group boat tour? I wasn't invited. A wine tasting? No one told me. By the time I saw them, they were already heading out, dressed in elegant evening wear, laughing like nothing was wrong. The first time it happened, I thought it was an oversight. The second time, I wondered if it was just bad timing. By the third time, I knew. It wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. And Mark, my own husband, wasn't just allowing it. He was part of it. That night, I confronted him. We had just gotten back to the room, the air between us heavy with unspoken words. I stood by the window, staring out at the dark ocean, my arms crossed tightly over my chest. "You could have texted me," I finally said, my voice tight. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Here we go." I turned sharply. "Excuse me? Look, I know you're upset," he muttered, tossing his phone onto the nightstand. "But this is just how they are. It's their way. His way. Their way." The words felt like a slap. "Mark," I said slowly, "we came on this trip together. But I've been eating alone. I've been sitting alone. I've been excluded from every single thing. And you don't care." His jaw tightened. "You're overreacting." "Overreacting." I let out a hollow laugh, shaking my head. "Do you even hear yourself?" He groaned. "Look, my parents have their traditions. You're making this a bigger deal than it is." Traditions. That was his excuse? "They're not just traditions, Mark. They're humiliating me." For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just stared at me, like he was seeing a problem he didn't want to deal with. Then he shrugged. "It's just for a few more days." A few more days. I turned away, swallowing the lump in my throat. I had spent years believing that, eventually, Mark would stand up for me. That he'd realize I was worth more than this. That night, I realized he never would. And that's when I stopped trying. I stopped waiting for invitations. I stopped asking questions. I let them ignore me. They wanted me to be invisible? Fine. But they had no idea what was coming. Because I had my own way too. I had spent the entire trip being ignored, sidelined, and treated like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. I had swallowed every bitter moment, every cold glance, every exclusion. But that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Mark slept beside me, I realized something. I was done. Done waiting for an invitation into a family that never wanted me. Done hoping that my husband would stand up for me. Done being invisible. If they wanted me to be separate, I would give them exactly what they asked for. But I wasn't just going to sit at a different table this time. No, I was going to remove myself entirely. And they were about to feel it. I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake Mark. My hands were steady as I reached for my phone, my mind already working through every step. Because, guess what? I had booked everything. The hotel? My name was on the reservation. The rental car? My credit card. The fancy dinner Richard had been bragging about for weeks? My account. The luxurious spa day Susan had been looking forward to. Oh yeah, I had booked that too. One by one, I pulled up each reservation on my phone. My fingers hovered over the cancellation button,